Sup friends, so for today's video I feel like talking about boredom. Why? Because I'm kind of bored and I think I have a pretty interesting relationship with boredom, and I feel like boredom is something that I have been thinking about for a long time. I have been experiencing for a long time, and it's something that I have strong feelings about sometimes, and it's something that I would like to get to the bottom of if that's possible. And so, what is boredom? And I have a whole theory of boredom. It's like a four-part equation, and the theory is boredom is the experience of when you have, and I mean you don't necessarily need all four variables to be in play, but when you have all four variables in play, it's when you get the most debilitating kind of boredom. So it's when you have a tired mind in a cluttered space. Um, Rest, declutter, satisfies, introspect. So it's when you have a tired mind in a cluttered space. What did I just say? Declutter, introspect. I'm trying to do it from memory. Tired, cluttered, satisfies. The third word is satisfies, right? So I memorize the directives rather than the conditions, because the directives are how you address the conditions. And so the four-part solution to boredom is to rest, declutter, satisfice, and introspect. And so satisficing is when you make a decision to be okay with something that's less than perfect, less than ideal. So I guess it's when you have perfectionist tendencies. I feel like I articulated this differently. But okay, so a bored mind, a tired mind, a perfectionist mind, and a lack of clarity about your utility values. So that's the last one is kind of the most seemingly technical, because if you're tired, rest. It's very straightforward. If you are in a cluttered space, declutter, because there's a lot of junk everywhere. You can get bored by junk. I'll explain this later. And the next one is perfectionism, or just some sense that the there is some best option, but you don't quite know what it is. So it's tied up in the last one. The last one is unclear utility functions, meaning you don't know what the value of each thing is. All right, so let's talk about this within the context of a wardrobe, or you can also talk about it in the context of there's nothing to watch. So the phrases that people use casually are, I have nothing to wear, and there's nothing to watch, or there's nothing to do. And I think, when somebody says I have nothing to wear, they seldom mean there's literally nothing in their cupboard. Usually what they really mean is that there is a clutter in their wardrobe. They don't know what the right outfit is. They don't have a clear sense of what the utility function of each piece of clothing is. So they don't know what exactly to wear. So it feels like there's nothing to wear. Similarly, I think so boredom is kind of a bug. It's an experience. It's a real feeling, right? But the experience is caused, in my opinion, by lack of clarity. So it's a frustrating experience. It's a foggy experience, right? So I think the phrase "the fog of boredom" has a ring of truth to it, right? Doesn't it feel right? The fog of boredom, and I think boredom in the general sense isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can be useful, roughly in the same way that so depression is a tremendous fog, and there's something about the fog of depression that can you know force you to develop alternate ways of being, alternate ways of navigating, of seeing. It enables a kind of creative destruction sometimes, because when you are depressed or when you're bored, you get immersed in a fog, and it's like being impaired, right? And the cliche is that when one of your senses is impaired, the rest of your senses have to carry more weight. They have to do more work to make up for what's missing. I think Bertrand Russell wrote an essay like a long time ago called "In Praise of Being Idle." I think, and there's this idea that I haven't read it in a long time. I think he wrote it in like 1923 or 33 or something, and he wrote that basically that the fear that some people have of being idle is kind of misplaced. There's this phrase that's like the idle mind or the idle hands are the devil's workshop. If you're too free, if you have nothing to do, nothing to occupy yourself with, then you can't be trusted because there's some part of you that just wants to cause mayhem and destruction and just be a nuisance in some way because you have no responsibilities, you have nothing to do. And again, I don't want to dismiss that entirely because I think there's a lot of these things, if they're like old cliches or they're old wives' tales or whatever it is you want to call them, like just old sayings, there's usually some element of truth to that. And I find myself thinking now about, I think, in Horace and Pete, which was like a TV show that Louis C.K. did. And people hardly ever discuss anymore, I guess, because Louis is cancelled. But in Horace and Pete, there's this dialogue where a character talks to his ex-wife. His ex-wife has just cheated on her current husband, I think, and she suddenly finds that her ex-husband, who had cheated on her, that she used to, I guess, resent and be angry at, and probably still resents and is angry at. She now has a strange thing in common with him, and she kind of wants to understand his point of view better because now she has, he cheated on her and she cheated on somebody else, and so they're both cheaters, right? So now they both have that in common, and I think what Horace said was that something like, you if I don't know if I'm remembering it correctly, but kind of what I took away from it was something like, if you get bored in a relationship because it becomes kind of dry and stale, and it becomes kind of dry and stale because you've been talking in formulaic patterns, and you've been talking in formulaic patterns because you're avoiding anything challenging or difficult, and you're avoiding things that are challenging and difficult because it's painful or scary, and so then you get bored in the relationship. But it's not that you're bored because there's nothing to do, just as it's not that you have nothing to wear or there's nothing to watch. You're bored because there are things that you're avoiding, there are things that you don't want to address, and the more things you avoid, basically, the smaller and smaller the amount of space you have is left. And then eventually something like cheating, becomes a kind of escape, or a kind of, how do you put it? You do something ridiculous or crazy almost as a way of continuing to avoid the thing that you've been avoiding. Or you don't want to have a difficult conversation with your spouse and talk about how sad you are about certain things or how scared you are about certain things. And so the intimacy is gone. But it's not that the intimacy is gone that is to blame, and I'm not looking to point fingers or blame anybody for anything, but really to just understand the situation. And the situation is that a person who gets bored in a relationship. So relationships are endlessly complex, and people are endlessly complex. And you can be married to someone for 10 years and not begin to really scratch the surface of the other person or yourself. All right, just each of you is living a shell script, a kind of a predictable. You're reading off a script. You're following a formula, a very very choreographed sitcom basically, and that becomes boring. But it's boring because nobody is changing and nobody is allowing the other person to change. Well, allow is a loaded word because it could be that you think that your partner wouldn't allow you to change, but you don't actually know that to be true. You won't know it unless you talk to the partner and you have a conversation about it. And those conversations are kind of scary because you might suggest something and they might turn you down, they might laugh at you. Just there's all kinds of things that could happen that you don't want to happen, and so you start to behave in a predictable way, and that predictability bores you, it bores your partner, both of you are not happy anymore, and then these things go badly from there. And I believe that this boredom is a solvable problem, and like it's funny because people sometimes say things like modern civilization is too safe, it's too clean, it's too orderly, and the human heart desires chaos. The human heart desires just randomness and novelty and newness. You can experience novelty and newness fairly easily just by doing something new or going somewhere different. Eat new food that you've not eaten before. Try rock climbing. Try, just something that you don't usually do changes everything, right? Oh, I mean, okay, it may not necessarily change everything, but it gives you a new perspective on things, My wife and I went scuba diving once. Neither of us can swim very well, and she accidentally kicked me in the face with a flipper, and it was just a funny experience. It was a funny moment for me to witness my wife kind of outside her comfort zone. We were both way outside our comfort zones. Neither of us is competent at diving, even the slightest bit. So we both got to see each other, look scared, vulnerable, nervous. And I thought it was a very endearing experience. I think it made me love her more. It reminded me of what I loved about her, and it made me feel more intimately connected with her, which is something that I wouldn't feel on a day-to-day basis when we are, going through the laundry, going through the chores, making sure all the bills are paid, all the kind of day-to-day material concerns, right? And so that brings me to, I guess, thematically a broader, considering romance, in a marriage, right? Or considering just with that understanding about relationships, and then so we take that understanding and I try to apply it to everything else, because we are each bundles of relationships with everything, right? With ourselves, with our past, with our perceived future, with our plans, with our body of work, with our friends, and just everything is made up of other things, and everything is connected. So everything is relationships, and relationships become stale because of what I just described. I want to say because of boredom, but when you get bored, when you become boring, all the relationships become boring because you've become a predictable shell script. You've become a formula. You've become a flow chart, right? And once the flow chart becomes very, very predictable, nobody really wants to be. You don't really enjoy. I mean, again, this might vary from person to person. Some people might deeply get pleasure out of so reliability and security and all of those variables are also part of what people want in relationships. But so the tension and conflict comes when so you want familiarity and you want novelty, you want security and you want adventure, right? So it's you can never have the perfect mix of everything, but you can understand which way you're falling on the tightrope, and you want to get back on the tightrope. And I guess I'm making this video partially because I feel like somewhere in my mind, I feel like I may have fallen off some tightrope without realizing it, maybe, and I start to feel bored. Well, I think when you truly fall off very, very badly, it becomes like you get into like a depressed state, or maybe and I guess the opposite of that would be to be in a very manic state and kind of crazy, thrill-seeking, irresponsible, damaging kind of way of being. But yeah, I have been feeling a little bit bored with regards to my work, and I don't have a job anymore, so my work is now what I choose to do. My work is so making these YouTube videos is kind of work. It's kind of I'm doing it for I'm telling myself that I'm doing it for fun. But I also know that, as a content creator, as a person who wants to make a living as a creative, like every piece of content that I put out is work in a sense. It's every tweet I've written 100,000 tweets. I've written I wouldn't have been able to make 100,000 tweets if it was all just work. If it was just work, doing my job, I would not have been able to sustain that kind of output, because I would have resented it. I would have gotten frustrated. I would have gotten like for me to keep going, I have to have some reason to go on that isn't you need to do this in order to go on. Like it's kind of meta and strange loopy, but like yeah, I need something more compelling. I guess it's narrative work, right? But solving boredom is partially narrative work. You need to figure out, so if you're tired, you need to rest. But like beyond, and if it's clutter, and even talking about decluttering, if you watch like Mary Kondo or anybody else who's good at decluttering, a lot of what decluttering is about confronting your reality and being clear with yourself about what you want and who you are. And if you watch like Queer Eye, right, the Netflix show, like people who have a bunch of junk lying around, or like, so now that I'm thinking about it, a lot of Queer Eye and Marie Kondo's episodes on Netflix as well, you see all these families or individuals, and they are kind of trapped in some kind of state. They've accumulated junk, and really the junk is a reflection of their mental state in a way. Like they're holding on to too much. They don't, like, often they're holding on to the past, or they don't, like, they're growing older, but they don't feel like they've been initiated into adulthood in some way. So they're still dressing like they did 10 years ago, 20 years ago. They don't feel like they can take care of themselves and cut their hair. It feels like it's an indulgence. And to some degree, decluttering is about, and I'm not talking about like radical decluttering where you throw out almost everything you own and minimalism and stuff like that. No, when I'm talking about decluttering, I'm talking about the amount of psychological energy, not quite the right word. But okay, what I'm trying to say is that your environment, everything around you, all the objects in your life are manifestations, conscious or unconscious. It could be whatever objects you have around you. So like here is a head from a vacuum, right? And here is a pen. I'm just introducing objects now. Here is an Allen key that I used to install my cupboard that I was putting together. Here is a practice balisong, a practice butterfly knife. It's not sharp. It's got holes in it. And each one of these objects has a story, and I'm not good at it, but it's fun to play. Each of these objects has a story. This is this is one of my wife's hair clips that's on my table for some reason, and just every object has a story. Every object, and it's not necessarily, I'm not necessarily saying it has like a meaningful narrative story, but rather it has some story element in the sense that so the butterfly knife reminds me. So I bought this because I wanted to have something to fidget with that was that involves developing some kind of skill. I haven't done a lot with it. I'm not very good at it, but it's just fun to like when I look at it, it reminds me of who I am, and not like the story of Visa is in one practice butterfly knife, but it reminds me that I'm a person who likes to fidget. It reminds me that I'm a person who wants to get good at something like that. And if it was something very, very expensive, let's say, and I bought it and I no longer enjoy it, then it becomes a reminder of like how I failed myself in a way. So I mean, this object gives me, it sparks a bit of joy, right? And I honestly do think that Kondo's sparks joy idea is very profound and very powerful if you really get into it. Because again, like every object in your life is a talisman. It tells you something about who you are. It reinforces a narrative, or it reinforces some narrative, and it's worth taking the time and trouble to be clear about what that narrative is, and if you like that narrative, and if you want to change that narrative, because you have the option of changing your narratives, which is not obvious to people. And I think part of the experience of boredom is feeling like you're not in control of your narrative, and you're kind of just in a state of bleh, like like if you're reading a book and it starts to get boring. A part of the problem is you feel like the story is not going anywhere. The narrative is what's it trying to tell? What are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to talk to me about? What's going on here? What's the point? What's it all about? Right? When you lose that sense of that, then you're gonna get bored, right? And so solving boredom is a lot about narrative management. And I'm thinking now about how I spent 2 years in the military. And a lot of guys I talk to about military experience, they will say like, "Oh my God, NS is so boring." I was not actually that bored during national service. I do feel like I learned a lot, and that time of my life had narrative weight for me. So even though I didn't choose to be a conscript, like it's a mandatory thing in Singapore, um, even though I didn't choose that, I chose to use that time to try and better myself because I remember being very kind of just sloppy and irresponsible as a teenager, which on retrospect I don't regret, but like I did what I did and I wanted to be different. I wanted to behave differently. I wanted to act differently, and so I framed that time of my life for myself as this is about getting stronger. This is about getting smarter. This is it's like I'm gonna do a self-imposed kind of self-betterment program, which I wrote about back in the day in my old blog, and it's super messy and I think I deleted a bunch of that because I was embarrassed by how clunky it was. But I don't think I was very bored then. I was. I mean, I was impatient. I felt like I was ready for the world to, I was ready for my life to change. I was ready to get to shoot my shot. I was ready to blow up. I'm still ready to blow up, right? But I was not that bored. When have I been most bored? I was most bored at school, obviously, because I just did I was so disengaged from the narrative that was imposed on me, and I did not quite have a competing narrative that made sense to me. So I was bored in school, and I would go home and do my own thing, but that stuff was very shadow psyche kind of thing. Like I wasn't consciously aware of what I was doing. I was just struggling to get by. And part of why I think I started this video and decided to talk about boredom was to diagnose my present case of boredom, which is much milder and much more manageable. And I think what is my diagnosis about my own boredom? I think I've started to feel a little bit trapped by the vagueness of my own vision. So I have a vision for myself as a creative. I have I made a goal for myself to write to do 100 videos, and I pretty much kind of know what those videos will be. I know at least 30 to 40 of what those videos will be, and I trust that I'll figure it out. But at the same time, I have my 1,000 word vomit project, which is I want to write 1,000,000 words, and I'm at 782,000 ish, so I still have 220 ish thousand words to go, and I'm tired, I'm exhausted. At I mean, I know I'll finish it, but I just kind of feel like a part of me is like, oh, why did I have to choose 1,000,000 words? But I know why. I chose it precisely because it's such a big number, and I wanted to reach that arbitrary number and do a big thing that I did not think was possible for myself. And just talking through this is I'm gonna have I think I'm having difficulty answering the question directly because simply talking through my boredom is revealing to me that I don't actually have to be bored because I'm clarifying my utility states, right? My utility functions. I'm introspecting. So I have a whole book that I'm going to release on June 1st called Introspect. And the reason I started writing Introspect was to address boredom because I felt like, it makes no sense to be bored because we live in the most exciting time of human history. We live, good or bad, right? It's just exciting. There's more information than ever. There's more opportunities than ever. It's just we live in the most anti-boring time, and yet boredom is a real experience that I have experienced from time to time. That I'm sure lots of people experience. And why? So why do we experience boredom in the most exciting time? And it's because of that overwhelming feeling. It's because of fear. It's because of uncertainty. It's because of all of those things that I described. And yeah, so I think boredom is to be, and it's like when I say boredom, I don't necessarily mean, sometimes you have a day where you don't feel like doing anything, and you don't feel like doing anything productive, and you don't even really feel like doing anything, like what's the word, recreational. You don't feel like going for a walk or watching a movie. Like maybe you just feel like scrolling through Twitter all day. And you can be fine with that. I have been fine with that a lot of the time. Like, like just, I don't feel like doing anything today. Like I'm having a day off, kind of, right? I just need to rest in that sense. And it is restful to not give a shit sometimes. But I'm not talking about that. That's not boredom in my book. That's just a relax, like a down, like there's moments of peak productivity and flow, and then there's like a recovery stage. So it's like a recovery day, sort of. But I'm not talking about recovery days. I'm talking about the experience. And maybe there should be a different word than boredom. Maybe it should be, some people describe it as being stuck, as being jammed, as being, like you're not even having fun when you're trying to have fun, right? Like you're telling yourself, maybe I should be playing video games. No, but like maybe I should take a break. Maybe I've been working too hard, and I should take a break, and I should, it's that really bitter and cruel state of I can't do any work because I'm too tired or frustrated or overwhelmed or just like work's driving me mad. I don't feel like doing any work, and if I try it, I'll just want to kill myself, right? If I try it, I just feel miserable trying to do any work. But if I try to relax, I can't relax because again, there's conflict going on inside the mind, inside the self, right? Because we are each multiple people, or we are each multiple competing interests, and when both sides are unable to negotiate, and there's of course much more than just two sides, but let's just say there's the do work side and there's the let's just chill side. And when the do work and chill sides are in direct conflict, and I bet this is reflected not just in the mind but in the body in terms of hormones and shit. So like one of the most miserable experiences is for me is like knowing that I'm tired, trying to go to bed, and finding that I can't sleep. Because at some level, my body and at some level, my mind is just not satisfied with the idea of sleep. Like it just feels like I haven't earned my keep in a way, right? And the idea that you haven't earned your keep is in my experience, it can be a very deep rooted psychological thing that is not negotiable in the moment. I can't negotiate with my feelings about earning my keep right before bed, because when I'm doing that right before bed, it feels to me like I'm trying to bullshit myself, and so I'm saying these things, but like in that moment, it's not negotiable. In that moment, it's like there is some counsel or some judge. There's some conflict resolution court in my head that I don't directly control in the moment when decision making is happening. And by decision making, I mean like even subconscious decisions like we should sleep, right? So I believe that can be reprogrammed, but I believe that takes time. And I'm pretty sure I've reprogrammed some parts of my brain in other areas. Like I think I've become a kinder and nicer person, more compassionate person, and I think that's something that you can't quite decide in the moment every time, because in the heat of a conflict, like there's decisions that are made that you don't get to directly choose in the moment. So you have to kind of build up anticipation, you have to simulate what it's going to be, so on and so forth. And like making this video right now and talking about this, I realized that I should obviously simulate that conversation with myself in the morning rather than right before I should go to bed. Because doing it right before I go to bed sounds like an excuse. It sounds like you're trying to get out of a thing, even though it's a legitimate grievance, right? And that's a problem with a lot of relationships as well. Like people, you have some grievance with your partner that you haven't raised, and then they have an issue with something that you just did wrong. Like maybe you forgot to buy something, or you forgot to clean something. You didn't do something, and then when they get mad at you, you get mad at them for the way they get mad at you. Which maybe they have an issue with the way they get mad at you, but because you're bringing this up right as they were mad at you about something, it will look like you are trying to get out of the thing that you're just doing. So the right thing to do, or the smart thing to do, is to say, so let's say my my mom is mad at me for something I didn't do, and I'm mad at her for being mad at me. Well, the right thing to do, which I don't think I'll be capable of doing because it's my mom, would be to tell her, would be to accept her frame of whatever it is that she's mad at me about, assuming that she has legitimate reasons for being mad at me. But would be to say, I want to talk to you tomorrow about how you're addressing me right now. But you get it, right? It's about scheduling conflict resolution for moments that are not immediate in the conflict, and that's difficult to do because it's choosing to do maintenance, right? And maintenance, there's always more maintenance to do. If you don't schedule your maintenance will be scheduled for you in the form of injury or damage or whatever. And choosing to have difficult conversations when you could be instead having a good time always feels like, why would you bring shit upon yourself, right? Like it's the sun's out today, why don't we have a good time, right? But like if you always do that, then you are condemning yourselves to having conflicts at the worst possible times, right? And you have to do some training, you have to do some maintenance when you don't feel like doing it, and then you should reward yourself for doing that maintenance. So you should go out for a nice coffee or ice cream and have have bits and pieces of those difficult conversations in the good times, right? This was supposed to be about boredom. Everything's connected. Everything is, it's all related, folks. I would like to wrap this up in the next couple of minutes. So, what have I learned? Have I learned anything? Yeah, just talking out loud about boredom has made me realize that I'm not bored, right? I mean, I was feeling bored before I made this. A while before that, until it clicked for me in my head. Oh, I should just introduce. I think Randy Pausch had this idea, which was like, if there's an elephant in the room, you should introduce it. And in his case, he had cancer, I think. But in my case, I was feeling conflicted about being bored, and that's what I should make my video about, being conflicted about being bored. And I don't believe that boredom is something that you should strive to get rid of as quickly as possible. So I don't believe in, you should have a list of like things you would watch if you were bored, a list of things you would do if you were bored. Like, the experience of boredom has something to teach you about yourself and your narrative and your story and your frame and everything. And you should, and I'm addressing this to myself, really. Like, future Visa, when you watch this, right, and you're bored. So the future Visa, when you're bored, you should watch this. There is something to be learned from the experience of boredom. Almost every time you realize that, and sometimes you're tired but you don't want to rest, then it's worth investigating and asking yourself why you feel like you don't want to rest. Oh, it's because I owe somebody something and I'm behind deadline and I should, whatever. But that can be addressed as well, but you should be honest with yourself about what your feelings are. And so maybe, I guess I said it right close to the beginning of it, which is that I think that boredom is really a symptom, or it's a condition that's created by things that are happening upstream, right? So rest satisfies, declutter, and introspect, find out your utility functions and figure out what you want. And if in the moment you feel like you don't want anything, you always want. So I can't remember the last time I didn't want anything, because right now if somebody asks me, what do you want? I'd be like, I want more friends, right? I have enough friends for me to be happy. When I say more friends, I mean I want to see other people. I want my friends to get more friends, right? I want my friends to not be lonely. I want my friends to not be sad. And again, like, sadness is not intrinsically bad, but it shouldn't be. I want my friends to have good lives. I believe that my brain just said virtuous life. And it's not necessarily a virtuous life, but a good life. Life is precious and fleeting, and we should have good lives. I think my life is pretty good. I think I can help other people have better lives, more fun lives, funnier lives. When it's sad, but you don't have to be lonely in your sadness. You can be alone in a way that's not isolated, right? There's lots of variables to this and lots of different ways to frame it, but better vibes for all, right? And a sense of relief from unnecessary conflict, release of unnecessary tension. If you're supposed to be sad, but don't be sad about being sad. That kind of thing. Done. I guess. Did I have a closing statement? Was that not my closing statement? Uh, I I guess I'll be curious to see how I feel tomorrow. I think before I realized that I wanted to make a video about boredom, I had a feeling that tonight might be a long night where I would stay up late doing I don't know what. But I do feel like having made this video, I think I will be able to sleep quite soundly. My body's a little bit sore from working out yesterday. That's another plus point. But yeah, um, so I'm trying to, in other news, I'm trying to get better at this YouTube thing, and I think that there's this thing that YouTube allows where you have like next video here, and I'm just gonna turn that on and see what happens. If you're still here, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for hanging out. Let me know in the comments what your experience of boredom has been, and I will see you around. Bye bye.